My name is Nhlanhla Mkhize. I am going to be introducing Professor Ramose today very, very briefly. We are missing our chairperson today, but as soon as she arrives, she will be taking over the proceedings. It is my honor again to introduce to you Professor Mogobe Ramose, our very, very distinguished professor of philosophy, law, and Ubuntu ethics. Some of you may have read his work. As I indicated yesterday, he is one of our luminaries, intellectual giants on the continent and internationally. So we are very, very privileged to have him in our midst today. Yesterday, some of you were here, and he indeed presented a very, very lively lecture on memory and Africa. So today we are continuing the conversation that we started yesterday. It is a conversation that indeed will not end as such. It will continue on social media and other forums, as we will be posting the lecture yesterday as well as today's deliberation on social media. So you will be able to continue engaging amongst yourselves as far as the issues are concerned. We do also want to mention that this is part of our decolonialization or anti-colonial project. It's an open space for us to debate those issues. So on that note, I want to say a very, very hearty welcome again to Ubaba Ndate Professor Ramose. Siyabonga kakhulu ukuthi uvume ukuthi ube nathi namhlanje. Siyabonga. It's going to be a very, very interactive forum today. So what we are planning to do is Professor Ramose will begin by sharing a few ideas with us with respect to research, epistemologies, and alternative ways of doing things in research, teaching and learning, and community engagement. And then thereafter, we'll open up an opportunity for all of us to engage him on our respective researches, be they at the master, PhD, doctoral, or postdoctoral level. So this is an opportunity to engage him on issues that are actually personal to you and very, very directly implicated in your own work, your own research, your own teaching. So thank you very much. On that note, welcome again, Professor Ramose.
Sanbona, good morning to you all. Those I have seen yesterday and those I am seeing today, a hearty good morning to you all. I must begin also by thanking Umtare Mkhize and his team for the decision to invite me to be together with you. I also want to thank you because you could have been to a funeral. Sia Fatina, as you know, he really died. So there were so many things apart from funerals that you could have been doing. You have decided to be here. This is very much deeply appreciated, and I thank you very much for that. I would like us to really be in conversation together on the issues that you will raise, on the issues that I am going to raise. Now, since we are talking about these issues in the framework of what is called education, whether it is higher level education or wherever, there are lots of conventions around this paradigm of education. So I would like to start with what is known to be the core of any educational undertaking, namely research. Well, it's very interesting that we see the word research, and I suspect that most of you are already aware that actually, if you hyphenate the word, you can have lots of things. Research, redo, replay. So the suffix re already suggests that you must repeat. You must repeat what has already been done by others. Others have been searching. You also are invited to search again. Why? I mean, people have searched already. Why are you searching? Really? Is it curiosity? What is it? Are you a skeptic? Don't you believe what they say? Because it is there. Research is already there. So what do you want? Take it and go on with other things. No, I must research. Well, you see, this idea of research actually is a reflection of a quality that all human beings have. All human beings actually are in search for truth. We are just, whatever truth is, we are in search of truth. We're not satisfied that somebody said it. No, we're searching for truth. If you allow me to be personal, I grew up at a time when there was no television. And so at home, in the evenings especially, we were listening to izinganengwane stories, dinonwane, our gogos, our grandmothers, our mothers. They were telling stories about this, that, Zelani and this one. All the time we were hearing stories. And Bogogo, our grannies, were quite good at that. So one good day, our mother decided not to tell us stories about ants and beasts, giraffes and that. She decided to tell us stories, a little story about herself. And the story was that she actually had two suitors, two gentlemen who said, hey, le ntombi yakamangena, goodness me, yamfuna. So then, when she ended the story, we were young, we were very young. The story ended with the words, then I chose the man who is now your father. Whew. I became very sad and worried. Seriously worried. So I said, Mom, may I ask you something? She said, yeah, sure, you do ask. I said, please, can you tell us, if you had not chosen this man, where would we be? I was too melogulala. She now sent us to bed. We had to go and sleep. You can see that our mother couldn't answer the question, so the best thing was. But you see, it is to indicate even complex issues about truth. How could our mother know where we would be if she did not choose this man? How could she know? So that was what worried me. Hey, I almost missed my existence. you see, so, you know, curiosity is in everyone. The search for truth is with everyone. Now, in the realm of education, I want to give you a few examples. Luckily, you are not like us who were listening to stories. You have lots of stories on your palm. You are people of the palm. If I say something, even while talking, you could almost click and see for yourself. We didn't have that opportunity or privilege. So, there is, as you may know, the history of Constantinople, way back, the Byzantine Empire. And so during that time, there was a way of succession. People knew that if the king dies, who is the next in line to take over? It was known. And the church was also around. People are spiritual beings. Human beings are spiritual beings. So there was the church. At the time, it was, of course, the Greek Orthodox Church. And so, at a given point in time, the king drew up the will to indicate who now should be the successor when he died. Well, this is called the donation of Constantine. Now, this donation of Constantine was very funny from the point of view of curious people. It was very funny. Part of the reason for its being funny is that actually it even assigned succession to someone rather far removed in the line of succession. I wonder, what is this? Of course, the end result, because I'm skipping lots of details, the end result was that it was accepted as an authentic will by some, not all. It was accepted as an authentic will, and so one of the results was the migration of the capital of the church. It migrated from Constantinople to Rome, and that's when the Roman Catholic Church got established. And so there were two churches, the Greek Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. As you well know, I suppose, the Greek Orthodox Church does not recognize the authority or the papacy in Rome. Why? Because as time unfolded, curious people finally found that the will drawn up by the king was a fraud and a fake. It was simply a way of making sure that there will be another church with capital in the Vatican in Rome. So it was a fraud. It was scholarship. Scholars studied the material, just the material on which it was written. The way in which it was, is this the usual handwriting? Curious people. Well, normally we put the signature on the left, but this one is put on. Every little detail was pursued, and it took several years, until it was finally established beyond doubt that no, this was a fraud, it's a lie. And so you can make up your mind. You can see that truth is not easy. If you pursue truth, you must really pursue it in quite a serious way. That's one example. The second example has to do with the famous Aristotle. Aristotle is well known in the West, all over. Well, how come that Aristotle is well known in the West? I'll give you some few hints. One of the ways in which Aristotle got known in the West was that his works, he's a Greek man, but his works got known in the West through the Arabs, namely Averroes and Avicenna. So, Averroes and Avicenna were the first to translate the works of Aristotle. So, when the West noticed the presence of Aristotle from the East, the works were studied. At that time, the donation of Constantine was a living reality in the West. In other words, the church, the Catholic Church in particular, was, as it were, a kind of universal ruler. I will come back to the expression universal. Anyway, there it was everything. However, whatever you wanted to do, the point of entry was through the Catholic Church. You see, at that time, the Catholic Church was so supreme that they even had the expression, well, in those days, like we speak English now, in those days, Latin was the English of the time. So there was an expression, extra ecclesia, nulla salus, meaning if you are outside of the church, we're sorry for you, the gates of heaven will be closed. So come into the church, so extra ecclesia, nulla salus. So the works of Aristotle coming into the West had to go through the gates of the church. And so you have somebody with the title Angelic Doctor, namely St. Thomas Aquinas. He is famous for his Summa Theologiae, huge volumes of work. And so Aristotle had to be studied first before he was disseminated. He had to be studied first. So the papacy already in 1272 banned the works of Aristotle in universities. We're not supposed to study Aristotle. No, don't study Aristotle. Why? Because people like Aquinas, the angelic doctor, were busy sanitizing. They were baptizing Aristotle first. Aristotle had to be baptized. If you read the works of Aquinas, he does not even refer to Aristotle by name. He refers to him as paganus, meaning the pagan. So we can't give this pagan work to our Christians. It must be Christianized first. And when we are sure we have made it Christian, then we can give it over. So Aquinas and others, therefore, you can see, I want you to see what is happening to the truth. I would like you to see that. You must see what is happening to the truth. The Paganus tells truth as he knows it. The truth of the Paganus is dangerous for our audience. Therefore, we must metamorphose this truth. We must doctor it. Aquinas is known as doctor of the church, like the people also. If you follow the patristic tradition, the so-called Patrologica Greca and Patrologia Latina, you will see for yourself that these patristics, the fathers of the church, were busy debating among and between themselves. But at the same time, they were the sources of truth. Must I say, manufactured truth. You see, so you can see, now this is the second point that I would like you to check. If you want a long story about this, there is a book called Aristotle in the West by a certain Van Steenberg, and then you can follow much more details about it. I'm interested in focusing on research as an invitation to searching for truth. I say truth deliberately and not the truth, because the Aquinas wanted to impose the truth. So we must be sensitive to the distinction between truth and the truth. You see, so we can even go back to Socrates. It was the same. As you know, Socrates did not even write. But the truth that he told and communicated was so dangerous that it cost him his life. He didn't write it, but it was too dangerous for dissemination. You see, so we must understand that as researchers, as people eager to know and reveal the truth, we are already facing a big challenge, because the truth that we might know, the truth that we might want to reveal and disseminate may not be considered as such by others for quite a number of different reasons. Well, I mentioned Socrates. You can follow, you will see Socrates actually, when he was confronted, some of his supporters were worried and shocked. Said, no, the allegations against you are untrue. This is lying. Yes, so you may not be sentenced to death for this nonsense. And he was condemned to death. No, we don't want that, please, Socrates. We have a plan. We have a plan so that you can escape. Socrates said, me? Escape? No, I'm not escaping. Truth remains, whether I'm alive or dead. What I have said, if it is true, I am prepared to die 100 deaths. And each time I wake up, I will tell the same truth. So there's no reason for me to escape. I thank you for your sympathy, but I will die. Okay? And so he died. So I think, let us not forget that seated as we are here, as researchers, as people in search of truth, we are already treading along the risk of dying. The question is, are we able? Are we willing to take that risk? Of course, it's an individual question that we must answer truthfully. You see, this theme of truth goes that way far back. You find it in Socrates already. You find, I gave you the examples of the Aquinas, I gave you the example of the donation of Constantine. But even when you check someone like Shakespeare, you find that this whole question of truth is running through human concerns. Take, for example, his Macbeth. You know that Macbeth, somehow, it is interesting. Shakespeare opens Macbeth with a very funny situation. When shall we three meet again? When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or rain? Is it so that thunder, lightning, and rain are separate when the whole thing is happening? Or they are part of a wholeness of? Is it separate? Why does Shakespeare want to present them as a kind of separate, distinct things? Why? And why does he dwell on the number 3? One of you was talking to me this morning, telling me that he's a theologian. So I think you will appreciate from the point of view of biblical numerology why the number 3. And let me not go into that. Anyway, then soon thereafter, Shakespeare tells us of apparitions. Apparitions. Hey, dipoko man. Yeah, apparitions. Apparitions who greet Macbeth. Let's see. Hail thee, Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth, in terms of the line of succession, was very far, very, very far from the status of Thane of Cawdor. He knew that himself. And he was surprised, but also prodded into an aspiration to become the Thane of Cawdor. And so, when he goes aside for one of his first soliloquies, what does he say? How does he describe this? He describes it as 2 truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling theme, of the imperial theme. Now, you get 2 truths. Why does he decide to call them truths? How do you believe apparitions? Since when did this book spoke? A real ghost. Since when did the ghost be the harbinger of truth? Why does Macbeth want to believe a ghost? How, my God. And he says, 2 truths. Because he knew he was lying to himself all the time. The subsequent soliloquies testify to this. For example, he said, wow, stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my deep and dark desires. He's lying. You see, he knows he's lying. Why should the stars hide their fires when things are normal? We want starlight. No, let not light see my deep and dark desires. Oh, self-deception is coming. See, he's lying. He continues this. I go to one of his other soliloquies. If it were done when it is done, then it were well, it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence. So he now knows that he can become the Thane of Cawdor only by killing, hence assassination. Of course, he had a good advisor. He went to his sweetheart to tell him about the apparitions and all that. And the sweetheart looks at him. You are a coward. If it were me having received such a message, do you know that I would pursue it with so much vigor that actually I would be prepared to crush the skull of my baby just to get to that position? You're a coward, you Macbeth. And so you know the rest of the story. Macbeth finally killed Duncan. It was only when he was king that he finally said, to be thus is nothing but to be simply thus. So you see, self-deception is also one of the main elements that we should take into account when we conduct research. It is not so that always other people will lie to us through their research. It is also true that we could be willing to lie to ourselves. We could be willing to lie to ourselves. Well, the same Shakespeare tells us that we could be better people, this time by homing in on Hamlet. We know that in Shakespeare's Hamlet, again the ghosts are playing a role. The ghosts are playing a role. The normal, natural feeling of love had the result that Hamlet's father died because his mother had good kisses with somebody else. And kisses are normal. Kisses are natural. Voila. Then Hamlet sees his father, the ghost of his father, in a dream, describing exactly how he died and why, and telling him why he died. So Hamlet becomes the skeptic. He doesn't believe. He becomes the skeptic. How? His book. It's my father, a ghost. Of course, you know, there are holy ghosts. You remember in the past, we used to pray in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost until it was thought theologically that the ghost can be terrible. So let's say Holy Spirit. Anyway, so Hamlet decided, I'm not going to take this lying law. What did he do? He decided to have a play within the play. So he called the play The Murder of Gonzago. Just listen to the name, it's so uncommon, Gonzago. The Murder of Gonzago. So he composed it according to the information he received from the ghost. And then told some of the friends, you sit there, another one there, another one there. And you watch my mother and my uncle, especially when it comes to the poisoning of the king, of the Gonzago. You watch the reaction of my mother and uncle. So he invited them also to the play. And then they came. They came. Exactly where the poisoning scene was played out. Oh, shame. They fainted. And so Hamlet thought, this is not just an ordinary dream. It really was my father who came and said this. And Shakespeare underlines this by taking a scene within this play where one of the nieces, Polonius, I believe, was going to a foreign country, to France, I believe. And so asked the uncle, what should I do? I'm going to be a foreigner. How should I behave? I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Then the uncle starts, these precepts look thou character. You know the story, give every man thine ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve your judgment. Neither borrower nor lender be, the list is long. And then he comes, he said, this above all. I gave a long list. This above all, to thine own self. Be true, and it must follow as night follows the day. Thou canst then be false to any man. It is impossible that you will lie to other people if you start first by learning how not to lie to yourself. That is what we call truthfulness. Learn not to lie to yourself. In that way, you will not lie to others. There are many other authors who deal with this subject. For example, Hans Kuhn has an interesting book called Truthfulness. Even Bernard Williams has got a book exactly under the same title, Truthfulness. Well, truthfulness, as you can see, can cost you your life as a researcher. In his history of science, there's many volumes on the history of science. Sartre actually, in volume 1, already warns us about this. Yes. You know, the way of research is so difficult and risky. It requires a lot of things. One of the things is what you have done already. I was not flattering you. I really appreciate very much that you're here, because I know that you could have been somewhere else. And Sartre talks about that, talks about in that book that you do have, as a researcher, you have to sacrifice certain things. Going to a wedding, going to a funeral, including the kisses and the hisses at times. Yes. Of course we know that kisses and hisses are open even to philosophers. If that was not true, Heidegger would not have been in love with Hannah Arendt. You may remember that Hannah Arendt was a student of Martin Heidegger. He eyed her already in class when he was already married, and they continued in their relationship. Even if Arendt married in between, their relationship continued. You see, of course, the famous JeanPaul Sartre also was in love with Simone de Beauvoir, the mother of gender studies. Of course, as philosophers and at Sartre's insistence, I love you, provided you understand my philosophical point of departure. For me, to be human is to be condemned to be free. Therefore, I'm not going to marry you, because marrying you means submitting myself to a condition of being a liar. And so JeanPaul Sartre said, if you love someone and you love me, you are free to do so and let me know. And I will do the same. And they stayed together in that situation for more than 50 years. To the extent that at a certain point, being in love with Nelson Elgrin in the United States, Simone de Beauvoir moved there, kept writing to Sartre. Sartre write. I suspect you know their book. One of the books is called Letters to Sartre by Simone de Beauvoir. You will see all these stories. So by this I mean that love is a normal human phenomenon, even open to philosophers. It depends on how you treat it. It doesn't have to be so formal. And a woman following the footsteps of JeanPaul Sartre, Luce Irigaray, has written a book, as you probably are aware. It's called I Love to You. Why I love to you? Well, you see, if I say I love you, you are the object of my love. So I am going to turn you into a real object of my love. You appear to me today, I don't like your dress. Oh, I don't want to shave, and you would look good with some Jesus-like beard. So all the time I make you. You are the object because I love you. So Luce Irigaray says, if we both must be subjects. Now you can see, if you follow the history, you see the argument of JeanPaul Sartre, and you can see very clearly that she's saying when you say, I love to you, we are both subjects of love. My love is to you for you to act on it. And so we are both actors in this love. But if I see a lady and tell her I love you, my suspicion is that she's going to run, go and tell her friends, oh, I met a madman. Why? Oh, he said I love to you. You see, love can be philosophically understood. Voila. So you now have a picture, I believe, of the intricacies of pursuing truth through research. It is intricate. It is risky. It is also deadly. So, I began by telling you about curiosity as an inborn human quality. Now you see, I want to put this into practice by one example. And of course, we become curious about where we are. So here we are, if I'm right. Let me look again just to make sure. Yes. We are at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. We are at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. This reminded me of something. I remembered that, KwaZulu-Natal, you see how it is written. It has a hyphen. KwaZulu-Natal. I remembered that way back when we had an enthusiastic geography and history teacher, she told us, and we had to remember these things. Now I don't remember for sure, but I remember she was asking us, Who? Is it Bartholomew Dias or Vasco da Gama who arrived in the coast and named it what? And on what date? So we had to remember that Natal actually was the date on which one of these two Portuguese gentlemen arrived and espied this place. He saw the place. He saw the place. And because it was Christmas Day, he called it Natalis, Natus, the birth date of Jesus. The birth date of Jesus was when this province was so-called discovered by one of these two gentlemen. So it was Natal. And of course the name KwaZulu was not there because these discoverers had the right not to ask you, what is the name of your country? They had the right not to ask you. So even if they see you, they won't ask you. So this became Natal. It became Natal for centuries. Well, at a certain point, it was then called KwaZulu-Natal. What is happening here? Who is who? Because now KwaZulu, in terms of sequence, is first. You see the sequence. It's KwaZulu first, and then Natal afterwards. You see the sequence. Why? Can't. Or do we have to go next door to Zimbabwe to prod our memory a little bit and remember that? There was a time when Zimbabwe was called Zimbabwe Rhodesia. For short, it was called Zimrod. The sequence was the same. It was Zim first, and then Rhodesia second. The sequence is the same here. It's KwaZulu first, and then Natal after. The end result next door is Zimbabwe only. And so, before the new airport was built, whenever I came to the old airport, when you walked out of the airport, in the arrivals hall, there was a tourist information office. And if you look at your left-hand side, you would see the inscription, "Welcome to KwaZulu-Natal Kingdom." You remember? It was even available in Sawubona magazine in South African Airways. You see? So, as time went on, I have a Sowetan copy where it was around 2006 when it was reported that King Zwelithini is displeased with Natal and he wants it removed. It was reported already in the Sowetan about 10, 12 years ago. But it seems the wish of the king is not yet realized. It seems the wish of the king is not yet realized. So that is a question. Is this province, is this country going to move like Zimbabwe, from Zimrod to Zimbabwe? Or is this representing a stalemate? KwaZulu-Natal represents an ethical issue and a political stalemate. I leave it there for now. And then you have also here translation. You see, now here in the university, it is very funny that we have, in terms of hierarchy, because this is vertical, we have at the top Natal, and then at the bottom in Sizulu. Kanti kunjani na? What is happening? Why? This is a vertical relationship. Who must be below? Oh, there's something very strange. This is research. There is something. I thought I should give an example. I'm continuing with the example. It is very strange. It's not only the translation. It is also the idea, university. You see, university. Of course, Africa has had its own learning institutions, somehow strangely described as universities. You see, if you follow the etymology of the word university, you will see again that it is two words. It is unius. Unius in Latin means one. And versum or versus, it means one version. One version. You see, it means one version. One version of knowledge. One version of knowledge. It was so interesting in 2013 when we had the World Congress of Philosophy in Athens, in Greece. And we were staying in different hotels, and we used the underground. And I heard some colleagues often say, oh, you know, you must alight at the station's name in Greek is Pan-Epistemio. And then they translated it elegantly as, it means university. I said, no. I'm not a Greek scholar, I'm sure. But I do have some little understanding of Greek. So surely, pan means all. Episteme means all knowledges. Now they reduce that to unius. It is not correct. All, pan is all, not unius. So because I was doubting, I had an opportunity to discuss with a Greek scholar who herself is Greek. And she said, no, you can't translate pan-epistemio by university. It would not make sense. Pan-epistemio means all knowledges. All knowledges. But at university, we have one version of knowledge. Yeah, madam. So you see, even there, a name change is critical. We need to talk the language of a pluriversity and not a university. I do argue this point in one of my already published articles called Teacher and Student with a Critical Pan-Epistemic Orientation. It is published in the South African Journal of Philosophy. Anyway, I will make it available to Professor Mkhize, and then you can receive. So you can see that even where we are, even the name requires research. It requires research. You see, before the University of Durban-Westville was somehow dissolved, I went there for an interview. And as you know, after every interview, you are being asked, do you have any question yourself? So I said, yes, I do have a question. What is your question? I said, please, my question is the following. It has got to do with the motto of the university. It was written University of Durban-Westville, like you write Marian Hill, and then the motto is Ora et Labora of Marian Hill. Now, University of Durban-Westville at that time had the following motto, Rerum cognoscere causae. So I said, this is the motto of the university. Please, I'm not asking for the Latin translation. I do understand Latin. What I am asking for is why this motto at all? And who were the progenitors of this motto? Because rerum cognoscere causae is a command. It means know the causes of things. Know the causes of things. So I got a virtually unanimous answer that the panelists who were interviewing me were not present when the motto was. So you know, you can see for yourselves what curious. They were not present, but they are not even curious about their own motto. Researcher must be curious. You get the point. Researcher you must demonstrate curiosity. You must demonstrate curiosity. You see? So, university really is quite a problem. Just this term, university, is quite a problem. We must rethink. If we want to think through research, what research means and the pursuit of truth, I doubt if we can properly pursue this under the name university. I should like to end almost where I started, namely that, you know, the path of research is seriously exciting, inviting. It is inviting, it is exciting, it is risky, it is deadly. You could die. And so I want to leave you in your reflections with Benedict de Spinoza. The last sentence of his book called Ethics. Those days these people were writing in Latin like we talk English. So the last sentence in his book Ethics reads as follows. Sed omnia preclara tam difficilia quam rara, meaning, but all excellent things are as difficult as they are rare. I am sure that you are rare people by having been and being present today with us here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that again we have had a very, very excellent introduction to this session this morning. Let us give Professor Ramose a big round of applause. This was really exceptional. He has really brought to our attention the actual meaning of research, which is not regurgitating information in order to get your papers. It is not regurgitating information so that you can get bread on the table. It goes way beyond that. It's something that you must be prepared to die in defense of. How many of us are willing to do that? Me, I'm concerned with my bread. So thank you again, Professor Ramose Siyabonga kakhulu. In order to give UProf a little bit of time to relax, we are suggesting that we take a short break. I'm not sure if SP and Polisa, we have got some refreshments at this point, or if we are going to have them later. We will see when we go out of the room. But the idea is that we take a short break of about 15 minutes or thereabout. And when we come back, it's now your opportunity to tell us what research is, what research you are doing, and the professor will give us guidance on your respective ideas. So thank you very much. Let's take a short break.
My name is Thobile Sifunda. I will be facilitating the question and answer session. It's a pity I missed yesterday and the first session in the morning, but I hope that I will catch up. Because Professor Ramose and his writings and what he stands for is what I breathe, eat every single day. So it's actually a pleasure to stand in front of you today and to have to facilitate a session of a giant in the name of Professor Ramose. And I'm proud, Prof, because you actually supervised and coached my PhD without you even realizing you were doing that. Because you can't be a scholar in this institution of humanities with Professor Mkhize on board and not know Professor Ramose. And these are the giants that have actually made us the people that we are today. So it is really an honor to actually have to facilitate in the presence of Prof. Mkhize and Prof. Ramose, because we believe that they actually are treading on very thin ice. They're coming up with ways of knowing that have not been affirmed for time immemorial. And I think we're here to actually say, unapologetically, that it is time that Africans rise and that we actually say and tell our own narratives. And it's good that they are here to actually reinforce that and make us, be proud of who we are. So I'm going to just take a few questions. I think we'll take about 3. And then is 3 okay, Prof? 3 at a go. So we will take 3 questions and then allow Prof to respond to the questions. I'm noting a hand from Prof. Mkhize and my brother over here and at the back, Ulubombo, there's 3, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Mine is not a question as such, but I do want to encourage you also to relate your questions and comments to your own particular studies where you are located, your own research, be it PhD or master or postdoctoral, whatever research you are doing, try to conceptualize it within the context of yesterday and today's deliberations. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And my name is Joseph. I'm based in the School of Social Sciences, Sociology, where I teach. And I'm very privileged to be attending this talk again. I was here yesterday and I was very inspired. And I wish that DVC could again bring you every weekend. So thank you very much again, DVC, for giving us this opportunity again. So, Prof, actually, that having followed your presentation today, and what came in my view, and is that the history of knowledge production has gone hand in hand with the existing policy of the time, politics of the time. Looking at the influence of the churches, especially the Catholic Church, how it has influenced and approved particular knowledge and exclude knowledge that was not going into the agenda of the time. So, and what comes into my mind again, looking at the history of colonialism and how the knowledge that have been produced and the knowledge guiding the world in which we live today. So actually that we found that the way knowledge that is produced is always influenced by the political system or political agenda of the time. So, and my question, we as researchers, so you can see the history and even some academics and some writing of the history of Africa itself. So you also actually that found that the history of Africa is written within the lens of colonialism. And it had some objectives and agenda that it needs to achieve. And again, that is what brought me back again to reflect on what just you have said here, University of KwaZulu-Natal. And going back again, how it is translated into indigenous language. So actually that if you can see that how the two, actually that is the way message that is conveyed, but the substance of the message itself remain the same. And actually that what the University of KwaZulu-Natal meant to achieve, and the way that is translated what indigenous language, so actually that you find that there's no difference. So, and that again brings us to reflect on the issues of transformation. So we have seen that across Africa. So this quest of what, of teaching what indigenous language is. So, but actually that what is taught is not different from how the message in the agenda that you want to achieve is different from being taught what in the Western language. So, because that even knowledge itself, that as I spoke from political perspective, so each and every knowledge, so is a new knowledge, but it has a political agenda, it has economic agenda. So then how do we begin of changing that, we as researchers?
Thank you very much for a quite insightful talk earlier. I'm particularly interested, or what piqued me is the notion of truth that you started with, to open your talk today about Ubuntu and inclusive epistemology in higher education. That for me conjured some thoughts about the confusion, if you like, about the notion of Ubuntu itself. I didn't intend to use Ubuntu in my PhD, but it ended up being the dominant theme that underpinned my research. But there are many questions which in the end hides the truth about what Ubuntu itself is. Is it a philosophy? What is it anyway? What is philosophy in the first place? Is the dominant narrative that you, as one of those proponents of Ubuntu, are perpetuating, is it misleading or is it partial about what Ubuntu is? Is Ubuntu about harmony itself or is hardwired with conflict? There are many questions that are brought into the discourse of Ubuntu. But what is also confusing, or what confuses me, is that those discourses are sometimes brought by the so-called, you call them spokespersons or spokespeople, who speak about our experience that we should be articulating ourselves. I would like to hear your thoughts about the notion of Ubuntu. What really is Ubuntu? Is it a philosophy? Is it a way of life? What is it, or what is philosophy in the first place? Because there are certain sentiments in that scholarship which tends to devalue Ubuntu not as a philosophy. I don't know then that what philosophy would mean. Thank you very much.
Kamakwen, igama ngobizo kaPomela. I'm a master's student in gender studies. Sorry?
Loud. You're near, but I can't hear you.
Aundev?
Louder. If you please speak louder.
Okay.
I cannot hear you.
Igama ngobizo kaPomela. I'm a master's student in gender studies, researching on the traditional spiritual roles of women in Xhosa society. Yeah. So, I had, I got a chance, I was not here yesterday, but I got a chance to listen to the audio that was recorded. And you spoke of I'm not sure if it's is it the monumental hills in Pretoria or Joburg, but on
Four tracker.
exactly that, and then if I remember correctly, you try to outline the conflict because you are saying Guti, there are. The monument itself is also remembers the oppressors and the liberators. And on the question of Ubuntu and spirituality within the African context, ukubaluleka okanye indima yobuntu ekuhlaleni kuqinisekisa indoba kukho uxolo nenzolo. Okwesibini, indima yamenyange, I hope you capture me correctly because ingase ndithethe ngesintu ukuze iphume ngale ndlela ufuna iphume ngayo.
Nikulalele, I will ask you, carry on, please.
Okay. So I'm saying that from my understanding, the role of Ubuntu and also like the role of spirituality, because we cannot speak of spirituality and speak of Ubuntu. I mean, we cannot speak of Ubuntu and leave out spirituality. My understanding is that spirituality should come first and then Ubuntu should follow, being informed by spirituality. Now, why should we find it problematic, and also Ubuntu and reconciliation, why should we find it problematic that we should have oppressors and liberators under in the same space when we working towards reconciliation, knowing for a fact that izinyanya nengelosi zezulu bangabantu benzolo noxolo, therefore peace and harmony. So if I got you clearly, I find that very contradictory. And this is also found also in political spaces where I usually say that we will struggle to move forward because we are confined by the politics of identity. Ziyaz restrictors, because always say, but as KwaZulu-Natal, and there's this narrative, we cannot be addressed by umlungu. And the question that I would ask is, and then we say we're Africans, but then again, as abantu, abanobuntu, bakwantu, uxolo nenzolo sizolufumana nini? Xa singenawukwazi ukucinga ngendlela ezasibangela into yoba siqhubekeke sihambele phambili. Ixhala lam lilapho. On Ubuntu within the university spaces, this university prides itself for being the pioneer of African scholarship. And you spoke about the truth and you emphasized that today. Now, akho nyani apho. Because the very same university that prides itself for being the pioneer of African scholarship doesn't teach African spirituality. It doesn't teach in isiZulu. So, akukho nyani within the academic spaces, and academics seemingly, they do not have the desire or the drive to change the spaces that they find themselves in. And with the power that they have, because there's too much independence that has been given on Landukan universities. But the people who are within the spaces, even the black people, they're not doing much. They're doing what Ubiko spoke about, Yoguti. They're trying to improve their positions within this space, instead of challenging this space. We cannot have a situation where academics do not know, are struggling to change the curriculum. You don't have to go to Senate and say, "Hi ngoku sifuna uchincha curriculum." Go into the classroom and teach what is supposed to be taught. So, xa singenanyani, Ubuntu asoze bube khona. And xa singamazi uNkulunkulu, which is spirituality, not religion. Xa singamazi uNkulunkulu, kukho i-disconnect between umntu noYehova, inyani ayisoze ibekho. So, also the universities I'm also concerned about the role of academics within the university space. Do academics, in the current context, know what their role is within the university? More especially social scientists. When kids in this university cannot even write critically, when academics cannot challenge each other, knowing what abenza umsebenzi wabo ngendlela efanelekileyo. So, when universities don't even scholarly engage scholarship, what's the role of the academia? What's the role of the university? What is the role of academics? Do academics even know their role? So I'm really concerned about that, because that also, if we are to succeed and move forward, the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is questioned by Western philosophers, and even questioned by academics, black academics within the space. Because I also did philosophy 1, and I did Ubuntu as philosophy. And the very same person who was teaching us Landuka Ubuntu as philosophy, he was questioning Landuka Ubuntu, whether it's African, it is philosophy or not. And they questioning Ubiko, saying that Ubiko is not a philosopher. And that thinking is informed by Western ways of knowing the university, as you explained it. Engos?
Like yesterday, I will give answers in telegram form, just because of time. I, in that way, endorse the point of Professor Mkhize that actually this is an ongoing conversation among and between us. It is not going to end when the session ends. We will continue the conversation, so I will take the opportunity to send telegrams as concise as possible, and at the same time it's a basis for continuous discussion. We will start with the first question, commentary. It's a commentary combined with questions. What I understood from that is one of the things that confront us today is what you call the history of knowledge production. The way in which knowledge is produced, you suggest, is always linked with the power of the day, historically speaking. To quite a large extent, this is so. Not because we need to reflect only on Michel Foucault, but also because many other historical sources other than Michel Foucault would testify to that. It all boils down to one critical point which I made yesterday, which was that we must remember that even history is technically and practically his story. It is his story because the canons of history as a science are such that they invite us to the belief that even if the historian were not present at the time, physically and personally present, at the time that things happened, still, the fact that he was absent does not make the historian less of an authority with regard to the events that happened then. Kanjani ngoba bengekho. Simple point. The historian was not there, therefore we have no reason to take the story of the historian as authentic. But the concept of science decides that even if the historian were not there, we must believe it. Are you really going to take that seriously? So this is the first indication of the intoxication of science. Science is intoxicating. It requires that we be sober. You see, so we must be sober. And one of the things that science claims, I'm relating this to what an interesting word you mentioned, which I will come to again. You mentioned the word neutral. Yes. Why? Because the same science states that what is knowledge is that which is only objective. It must be objective in order to get the status knowledge, right? And so how do you attain objectivity in science? Simple. By employing the principles of verification and falsification. If you have these and you apply them to any situation, the end result is objectivity. Voilà. Vous parlez français, j'espère, hein? C'est ça. Okay, so then it turns out that for centuries of history, remember that even the discipline of history itself has a category called prehistory. Hey, really? Prehistory. There was a time when there was no history. I mean, that means there was a time about which the historian is ignorant. So, but you must put it nicely. You must call it prehistory. Voilà. C'est très difficile, monsieur. Voilà. Okay. So, you see, you have it that way. You have it that way. That after centuries, our sisters are here and our mothers are here, decided to challenge this idea of objectivity in history. He said, you see, when we study this, we find that actually what you call history is actually the story of male actions all the time on the scene. So history, in fact, despite its claim to objectivity, is actually his story. It is his story. So, objectivity is not credible at all because it is his story. It is his story. We want also her story. And her story will be written by us. Voila. So the women came even with strange philosophical ideas, like I mentioned in the morning, I love to you. Voilà. You see? And of course, it was not only the women. We also, the colonized people, told that even if the women will now say, yes, we have his and her story, what about us who had no voice at all because of the right of conquest? We have a voice. We have experience. We have a claim to affirm and assert the truth about ourselves. Therefore, we are still a long way to our history as human beings, to our history as human beings. So it is unnecessary to take objectivity lying low. That's what I meant in the morning. We must take these things with a grain of salt. And this does not only appear in the human sciences, even in the social sciences, you will find the same. I mean, in the natural sciences, you will find the same. For lack of time, I will mention a word, and because you are people of the palm, you will be able to find it. Just tick on your palm, Lysenkoism. Lysenko was a Russian biologist, and the rest of the story is on your palm. Even with regard to the natural sciences, there is not only a possibility, but there is reality that in the history of knowledge, lies have been told with regard to. Second, in the natural sciences, we have a deadly disease, HIV and AIDS. And so, one of the best researchers, again, you will go onto your palm, one of the best researchers of German extraction actually challenged his colleagues. He was all the time a very good scientist, very good scientist. He emigrated to the United States. He used to get stacks and stacks of money because of his excellent research. And so, when we know there was a contest between Washington and Paris on who actually discovered. So I want to check Luc Montagnier, boom, on your palm, and then the rest will follow. Okay? Robert Gallo in the USA, then the rest will follow. All right? So there was a debate around that. And then what happened is that in the process, this German professor said, no, I don't think it is enough. It is not enough scientifically to say that HIV is really the main one which leads to AIDS. There is something more. Me, the scientist that I am, I want to tell you that I am so sure about my research that actually I'm asking you to inject me with HIV/AIDS, and I will never have with HIV, and I will never have AIDS. They refused to inject him, and then he didn't get all the research money anymore. So you see, even in the natural sciences, we have this. Today, we are under a nuclear umbrella. If Trump decides to use the trump card of strategic nuclear weapons, both himself and everybody else, including the ants of this planet, will be wiped out. Everybody. The strategic nuclear weapons are such that if they were ever to, those that are owned by the United States and Russia, they are such that if they are to be released, even by human error, nobody and nothing will survive. This mother planet Earth will be reduced to a radioactive rubble. Okay? Now, in spite of that, Trump and his scientists are talking the language of Star Wars. What do they mean by that? Star Wars. They mean that it is possible to have a defense in the skies. In the skies. They mean that it is possible to have a defense against these weapons. In strategic language, we call these weapons MAD. They are mad because what they mean is mutual assured destruction. What that means is if Putin presses the button first or Trump presses the button first, none of them is going to succeed. It doesn't matter. That's why the word assured. Whoever starts first, no one is going to succeed in this war. Because the technology is such that Trump will see that Putin has pressed the button and the other way around. And the speed of the weapons, everything is calculated. So much that they know that if you press now, it takes 30 or whatever. The cities of the world, especially of the United States, Europe, every city is viewed by these weapons, ready to destroy. Now you must ask yourself, who is the real terrorist? Voila. Ready to destroy, not ukhuluma ngenkulunkulu. We have God here on earth because God, if God is really supposed to be the one who gives life and to creation, and he's overtaken by technology. We can wipe ourselves out and every other thing of God's creation. So why do we need God? We are God. Yes, we are, factually speaking. So you see, it means that we forever have to be careful. Now, they talk this, in spite of this, they're so sure about this. And yet they say it is possible to defend themselves. It's a lie. Today, it is a lie to say, in technical language, it is called Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI. But in ordinary language, it is called Star Wars. And people go watch film Star Wars. I mean, even the name of the film should be banned. Okay? But the Russians say, from a scientific point of view, Star Wars is impossible. So those in the West talk Star Wars. In the East, they talk Star Peace. Do the Russians love war? The answer in their own Russian is "niet," meaning no. So, let's not go too far. You can see that there is a problem with the idea of objectivity and the concept of science, right? It is not necessarily the bearer of truth. In the past until today, science is not necessary. I don't say it does not. I am saying it is not necessarily the best bearer of truth. As a researcher, preserve your skepticism. Then it will be healthy. If we need to add something to what you raised, I want to be a little aesthetic, but sarcastically so that we know that as researchers, we must learn something. A researcher proper recognizes that the more I know, the little I know. Each time I think I know, I actually expose my ignorance. So the more I know, the less and less I know. And one of the aesthetic moments that you can have for that is no less than Alexander Pope's essay. It is called An Essay on Criticism. The first sentence already is, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pyrean spring. There, shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, but drinking deeply sobers us again. C'est tout pour vous, messieurs. Deuxième question. Voilà. The second, about the concept of truth. I think from the way you were listening, you would suspect that I have already answered you. So I will dwell on 2 points only. I was telling one of you during sideline discussions this morning, which I like. That's why I say the conversation is ongoing, sideline discussions. We were talking about liberation theology and the problems around that, and theology, this and that. And I was saying to him, what is the locus theologicus of theology? Because the object, logos, is science. That's why it is all over. It's sociology, as you see, it's logos. Anthropology, as you see, it's logos. So logos is science. It's for this science I was just describing. That is logos. All right? But theos is God. Now, which God is your object of study? Because theology is okay as a science if it studies Allah. Theology is okay as a science if it studies Yahweh. Theology is okay as a science if it studies the God of Jesus Christ. So I said, well, if you look at the trajectory of temporality, if you look at time and you follow what I was saying yesterday about Africa being the mother of Homo sapiens, if you look at that, you must, in scientific honesty, admit that Jesus Christ is actually, in terms of historical time, Jesus Christ qualifies as umafikizolo. Yeah, he just came yesterday. He came yesterday. And since Jesus came yesterday, we have to ask the question, by what authority is Jesus able to have total and absolute control over history, retroactively, at present, and prospectively? By what authority? By what authority? Umafikizolo. Control kanje? Something must be wrong. We tataphi le authority. We must ask. Singabantwana, I mean, a researcher is a child. You must ask. A researcher is curious. You must ask. You see? And if you want to tell us that, it is because uJesu uyinkulunkulu, it's religion after all. By the way, you must distinguish between theology and religion. So, then we will ask you, do you remember? There are many, but I want to remind you of one, a particular writer by the name of Etienne Gilson. One of his books, he wrote many. Gilson is Gilsone. Voila. So one of his books goes under the title God and Philosophy. Now, this particular book revolves, it turns around one fundamental thesis. And the thesis is the following. He writes that God is not a scientific probability. Then you have a comma. I will come to the rest of the sentence. God is not a scientific probability. It means the word probable is not accidental. It tells you that you cannot use an hypothesis and say, by this hypothesis, I want to go and make an experiment to test the veracity or the falsity. God cannot be proven in that way. You cannot go to the laboratory like you and I can go to the laboratory and say, iron will melt at so many degrees centigrade. And we put it there on fire, we watch at exactly the point when we reach 98 degrees centigrade, it starts melting. Then you don't have to believe, you know. You make a transition from belief to knowledge because you know now for sure. Why? Because we went to the laboratory. We proved it. It is proven that iron, however hard it may be, at this point centigrade, it will melt. And it melted. So you don't need to believe. You know. Voila. Because we applied verification, falsification. Now the concept of proof with regard to God does not go that way. That is why Etienne Gilson is arguing that God is not a scientific probability. No, it's not. You may go read the works of Fulton Sheen, Apologetics and Catholic Doctrine, for example. You will not find any proofs of God there, although the whole book is about proving the existence of God. Never mind going back to the Middle Ages to St. Anselm of Canterbury on his ontological argument. But voila, let's not put too much at a time. Now, you see, the point is that God is not a scientific probability, comma, but a metaphysical necessity. You must see the contrast between probability and necessity. To be human, to be a human being is to be a being that aspires to an understanding of what God is. But you can find God, your own God, not anybody else's God, your own God you can find in the metaphysical realm. We can take a pause. What is the metaphysical realm? The metaphysical realm is exactly the realm outside physia. Physia is nature in Greek, right? So we go outside of the empirical domain. Meta is beyond. Let us go outside of the empirical domain if we want to search God. And there, because God is necessary, we don't need anybody to teach us God. Study Kwasi Wiredu, and you will find that he mentions that in Akan culture in Ghana, there is a saying that you cannot teach God to a child. Because God is already there metaphysically. God is already there metaphysically. So you see, when it comes to that, these very ancient arguments, I refer to Saint Anselm. I can go back before Anselm, but not necessary. Today, as we speak, the same arguments are very much with us, namely in the person of a very interesting American scientist, Richard Dawkins. Lately, his book is called The God Delusion. The God Delusion. Well, he is a scientist. He says, you cannot prove that God exists. So why waste your time? Those who think that God exists are cowards. They are people who fear to think scientifically. And that is why they dive into the idea of God. All right? So it's a thick book called The God Delusion. Sorry, I forgot my copy in the plane on the way to Dakar, but never mind. So anyway, he is not left alone. No. Other scientists like him have written books in response. I will quote only one by McGrath. The title of McGrath's book is The Dawkins Delusion. Okay? It's on your palm. The Dawkins Delusion. Something wrong? No? Oh, okay. So you can see that, you see, this whole idea of God, Dawkins is following this tradition which described metaphysics as nonsense. But they were not insulting. They were not using English in an insulting, derogatory sense of nonsense. No. They were actually, it's even hyphenated, nonsense. According to this school of thought, metaphysics is nonsense. So I told my conversant this morning that, you see, in the metaphysical realm, everybody is free to choose their nonsense. And no nonsense is superior to another nonsense, because none of the nonsenses can be proven. You see, none of the nonsenses can be proven. You can't prove your nonsense, I can't prove mine. So please leave me with mine. Leave me with mine. No, don't bring guns and this to make me Christian. I don't need that. Don't bring guns and this to make me Islam. I don't need that. You see? So, yes, truth, even in religion, is a problem. And yet, it should not be a problem. Actually, superstition is nothing other than the arrogance of one religion to prove its assumed superiority over other religions. Just remind them that theirs is nonsense equal to yours. Okay, so there we are. Now, with regard to the question whether or not Ubuntu is a philosophy, I do answer that question in chapter 3 of African philosophy through Ubuntu. I believe it is accessible. It will be accessible. Hopefully, Prof. Mkize will have an announcement about the accessibility of the text. So please read it carefully. And, well, it is the revised version. Even the original version of 1999, as far as that particular chapter is concerned, all I adjusted with some corrections on footnotes and references. For the rest, the core argument remains. So you will find it in African philosophy through Ubuntu. What you will not find in that chapter is the ritualization of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is compassion. Ubuntu. I do philosophy of Ubuntu. I do not do a kind of liturgical incantation of human qualities, which you can find anywhere. You know, in the Catholic Church, for example, in other churches, we pray, Santa George, pray for us. Santa this. Ora pro nobis you will not find in chapter 3. Ubuntu is not a liturgical incantation of human qualities that are found everywhere among human beings. Rather, it is an examination of how and why we arrive at that, philosophically speaking. Okay? Yeah. I think, yes, in part, I think I have been answering you. Do you agree? But I'd like to add a few more points. I must say you are right. It would have been good if you were with us yesterday. For example, I mentioned something about DNA, invoking the Genome Project, and showing from that in fact, we as human beings still are so much the sons and daughters of the same mother Africa that even DNA has proven that. So we don't need to be color-oriented people, black, white, yellow, or blue, culture. We become clumsy. We become clumsy. We must think deeper than this. They are interesting, they're nice, what you call the politics of identity. They have their own limits. They actually conceal the ethical issue that you and I are brothers, not only by talk, but even by scientific investigation. If you want to see that, you will find it from the book of the chairman of the Genome Commission, Colin Francis. He has written a book called The Language of God. In part, he is answering also Dawkins. In part, he is answering Dawkins, if you read the book carefully. Voilà. So yes, you would have noticed that in that way, I am far from saying, Abelungu. Belungile bona, I don't know. But Abelungu, seriously speaking, are just blood and flesh and bones like you and me, and our chemical composition and is the same. So they must be mad people because they think differently on a very funny basis. They must be mad. And it is this madness which turns them wild against us. It is this madness. That's one part. The next part, I think, was Sundler. Sundler was a Swedish theologian who worked very much among what he called the Zulu people. Even uNkulunkulu, he tries to analyze, I mean really. When we ask it, what is uNkulunkulu? Unkulunkulu means nothing in Zulu because it simply means the bigger. What is it? Find him, give him, or her. Bigger, what? You see, uNkulunkulu is one of the clearest examples of mistranslation. What was he translating from the Zulu? What was he translating? It's an invention. But when you go to the vigils abafileyo, oh uNkulunkulu, siyabiza uNkulunkulu, uphi man? Even Suntla in his learned writings cannot identify uNkulunkulu. Can you identify uThixo? Maybe uThixo makes better sense than uNkulunkulu. All right? So please follow Unto Usundla. You are people of the palm, you will find him. You can also find that Gabriel Sitilwani. Sitilwani is also a South African theologian. S-E-T-I-L-O-N-E. His initial is G, and his book is called The Tswana Concept of God. So I will leave out the other concepts of God from West Africa, but they are there. Olodumare, if you like, you can, because you are people of the palm, that Olodumare, you will see West African, Nigerian, you will see how and why we think about this. We have this metaphysical necessity. It's permeating. It is forever present. Now, to show that it is a seriously metaphysical entity, this idea of God, do you remember, I don't know, but in our time, God was depicted as a white man with very big eyes. Ooh, so big, white and bearded. And you could see only part of him. It was as if he doesn't have the rest of the body, but do spirits have bodies anyway? I don't even know how they could manage to draw him because his spirit is invisible. So how they managed to depict God? No. But after the women, and he was male, you couldn't doubt that he was male. And after the women complained, yeah, you oppress us because your God is male. You see, he's male. Theology said, please don't worry. We will make him female. So, God became female. How? Abosisi were left out. We are black also. And others said we are brown. That's why you oppress us, because you are black and your God is white. Don't worry. We solved the problem. The solution was to make God a multicolored hermaphrodite. So, God as we have it, because if I say him, I'm wrong. So it's better to say God as we have it today is a multicolored hermaphrodite. So you must see the movement of science, how it is moving to create God. Yes. Finally, I want to ask you to please read one of my articles called Reconciliation and Reconciliation. Reconciliation. Becoming brother and sister again. Reconciliation is for bookkeeping. It's for bookkeeping. You know, in bookkeeping, you don't leave the office until you have reconciled the book. The debit side must balance with the credit side. If there is 1 cent missing, we couldn't send the returns back. Everything must balance. Once that is done, everything is over. Now that is reconciliation. We gave you your freedom. Of course, it's a lie that they gave us our freedom. We gave you your freedom, so everything is okay. We don't want to be your brothers. That is why there is no reconciliation. Thank you for now.
Big hand. Now, Prof says, I keep my nonsense, you keep yours. Now, ladies, you've been quiet. Now, I don't know if you want his story or her story. So I think I'm going to give this opportunity to the ladies now and also take cue from Prof in terms of when we finish the session. But I will invite the ladies. Ladies, her story.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Siphiwe Motlong from the School of Applied Human Sciences, the Social Work Department. Thank you so much, Professor Ramose, for an enlightening today and yesterday. My question is related to my PhD study. I'm looking at an analysis of academics' race and racism discourse within academia at UKZN. My question is in terms of the stance that I've decided to coin that I'm taking. I don't know if that makes any sense. Some of the things that people alluded to came through very strongly in my study. For example, the whole issue of the epistemicide that you spoke about yesterday, where certain voices are obviously still not heard currently. When we're talking about the decolonization of academia, there's still a big struggle. Obviously, my study, just to give you a little brief idea, is not just looking at, I'm looking at all the 4 delineated racial groups, Black, white, colored, and Indian, notwithstanding the challenges with race as a social construct. And what came through is obviously the different stances that different academics have in terms of how they view Africanization. That was one of the big themes in one of my chapters. So my question really is related to one of the ways that I decided, I'm looking at it through a social constructionist theoretical framework, but one of the ways that I decided to explain in terms of critiquing, because I was doing a lot of critiquing of the fact that it's not being accepted that these new voices need to come through. And one of the things that was also clear is that there was the thinking that I'm being judgmental from those who were reading, and it was, and I decided to coin it as an Africanist standpoint, critical Africanist standpoint. The reason I'm asking you about it is because I'm a little bit nervous. I did explain that it's a personal critical Africanist standpoint because I know I do not represent all Africans, but I know that I speak from a stance that is often not heard. So I'm really asking if it would be acceptable to coin something like that, if I'm making any sense.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tolani. I'm from the School of Education, and I teach in isiZulu discipline, and I also teach isiZulu second language to the non-native speakers. And my question is with regard to what came up from my research, PhD research. I was observing or studying how isiZulu is taught to non-native speakers. Some of the things that came up among them is like the gender role stereotypes. And my question is gonna be specifically on some elements we use when we teach some grammatical forms and conversation. There is, the Zulus will attest to this. There is something, I don't know how we call it, umlolozelo, where we teach our young ones, even to the native language, wenomathemba, ushayo ubani. So the way we teach the language, not necessarily isiZulu, but there is this thing of like, the men are superior than women. When Nomathemba, hey Nomathemba, who hit you? It is this very man. And go and call him, I'm afraid. And then and so all those things, and there are so many, this is just an example, and it came out and it's like, why? And we grew up knowing that I'm afraid of the men. And the men beat women. And go and call him, I'm afraid. So all those things. So I'm so like into this thing of like, why are we so afraid of the men?
Good day, everyone. My name is Claire Mundlana. I'm a master's student, and I had the privilege of working under Prof. Mkhize for my thesis. Prof. Ramose, I just want to say I am very privileged personally to have been part of this experience, because I come from an institute that's very colonialized, where I had no exposure to the Afrocentric perspective. And working with Professor Mkhize has really opened up my eyes, and also just, it's really brought me back to who I am as Umzulu. So my question is with regards to my analysis. I really struggled with making sure that I represent my participants well and also maintain their views and perspective as they were presented. Working under the Afrocentric perspective under Ubuntu was very eye-opening for me. But the biggest challenge came with the analysis. The fact that I went back to the colonized way of thinking, of coding, of labeling, of naming, like we said in terms of language, that everything needs to be named and labeled, as we spoke about yesterday. I felt like I was losing my participants' perspectives and views, because labeling is not something that we really identify with as Africans. We have idioms that don't have just one word. We have sayings that we use that when translated, we're being lost. Because I presented my thesis in Zulu, the extract, and then translated for someone who wasn't Zulu. And I was really struggling with this process. And I'm wondering how do, as young researchers in this field and still learning, how we maintain those views and perspective and represent our participants in the most authentic way we could possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Oh, sorry, you've got
Yes, indeed. Even beauty, as I told you, is appreciated by philosophers as well. Thanks very much for your input and indeed your participation in this. I would like to start with first. I see, as I was listening, you really found the use of the expression, I'm looking at, you're looking at. So, indeed, that is proper for conversational purposes. It is good to say, I'm looking at. My hope is that you haven't written that in your work, because then if I were to be one of the markers, you would have seen in the margin, please avoid colloquial language. So I hope you are not looking at in the written word. Okay. Yeah. Now, you also mentioned that you are dealing with quite a number of groups in your research. And among these people, you mentioned the colored, am I right? I think if I were your marker, I would, with respect, ask you the following question. What was the original color of the colored before they were colored? You get my point? What was the original color of the colored before they were colored? The background to my question is again sub A, sub B. When I went to school, we used to have a session called drawing. So we bought drawing books. And then we had crayons as well. The drawing book was always white. And then, you know, like little children, it was now a coloring session, so we colored. Mistress, come and see. There she comes and she sees. So I put pink together with blue, yellow, wah, wah, wah. It's nice. So the original white color was then colored. You get the point? The paper was no longer as white as it was before because it is now colored. Now I'm asking by parity of reasoning. I want to know what was the original color of the colored before it was colored. So this is a question to suggest that, you know, there is no color under the sun. I have just been telling that we are all 99.9% identical. Please intervene.
Prof, I did deal with the mega controversy regarding the social construction of race. I did have a disclaimer dealing with exactly what you are speaking about, and the fact that race doesn't exist as a real phenomenon, that it is socially constructed. I have a whole subsection where I deal with that. So I am fully aware, and I've even quoted people who challenge this whole concept in many different
The concept of colored or the concept of race?
The concept of race.
Yeah.
So the point, the color issue isn't even, because it's a concept, even whiteness, as you spoke yesterday, nobody's white per se and all that. So the point isn't about the color, it's about the construct and what it represents. So I do deal with that in a lot of detail.
Mm-hmm. While you are still holding the mic, I understand that it goes that way. You can, from the framework that you have adopted, you can advance the critique you're mentioning. But given the sensitivity here at home of this particular coinage, colored, did you somehow indicate that you use it under protest?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily use exactly those words, but I did indicate, I did put a disclaimer indicating exactly some of the things you're referring to, in that we are human beings. I know about the cradle of humankind in Sterkfontein. I understand all the genetic, all the research behind it, and some of the amazing research you added to my knowledge in that regard. And so I understand all that. However, as all of us are aware, in our South African context, these social constructs do hold a lot of power. And there's a certain way of thinking in these different constructs that comes through so in such a major way, even in the responses of the academics, that it was actually quite telling about how internalized they are. So I do put a disclaimer dealing with that, yeah.
No, I'm glad that because you know yourself how sensitive this is, so you tread carefully when it comes to that.
I tried my best. However, we live it. And so I couldn't see any other way around it because we live it so in such, okay, you get the point, I think.
I understand, yeah. My next point is the difficulty you have been having. You were so pressurized, if I understood you well, that somehow you found yourself having to say, this is my personal, because I don't represent everybody. You understand that so many writers do write like you do, adopting a similar framework and still pretending that theirs is objective without actually having to make the concession that you are making that actually this is personal. Well, 2 points about it. One is that, you know, there is a text by George Yancey. He's a black American. It's called Black Bodies, White Gazes. And so he actually affirms the validity of the personal as the scientific, without shame. And he does it very well, invoking philosophical and sociological arguments to say there's nothing funny about this. That is one. Number two, it is also the case that even in feminist epistemology, we find more and more arguments for what some would call narrativity. We now have reached the point that stories must be told. Not only must they be told, but they ought to be told for ethical reasons. They ought to be told. And you can't tell story in a vacuum when you are arguing about these matters. Your personal story is at the same time a matter of public interest. And therefore, if you talk the language of objectivity, there is no reason why it should be limited to those stories which have been written in a particular format according to a limited paradigm of knowledge. You can't do that. Next, if your story is deemed to be nonsense, like they tell you that it's unacceptable because it is nonsense, I hope you will, or excuse me for the rough language I'm going to use now, because it is not meant to be offensive or rude, but it is meant to emphasize the point. I think your markers should be told in very direct and clear terms that right now, as we are sitting here, there is a lot of shit in laboratories. Of course, laboratories are busy with shit, examining all kinds of things to be sure that somebody else will be healthy. Is that all right? So if your story is shit, it deserves scientific attention. It deserves scientific attention. Okay, so I wouldn't shiver very much being told that it is personal. Okay. We go to the question of language. Indeed, there are lots of inbuilt, genderized seriously genderized implications in language. You do find them. One example that we do not find it only in isiZulu, but in other languages as well. A colleague, a Nigerian lady, a philosopher by the name of Sophie Oluwole, has actually compiled a book exactly on that topic, showing in her own Yoruba language how many expressions like you just gave us just a tip of the iceberg, that actually this thing is there in language. So from the point of view of social linguistics as a science, we definitely have the duty to decode these languages. Otherwise, we don't win. The women will remain where they are, not knowing why. So from that point of view, yes, your undertaking for me, if it is oriented towards decoding this in a way that our children, our women, will get to know themselves better and reaffirm and reassert their right to be. Surely, I think you have every reason to proceed. Now you have every reason to proceed. You might like to add another Nigerian lady. She has also written a philosophical text, Oyoronke. So you know the title, right? The Invention of Women. Voila. So please check those two, and hopefully they will strengthen your line of argument. The last one is about labeling, classification. You had problems towards the end, right? If I understood you, where now you had to label so many things. Well, like we said with regard to the first comment question, you don't have to. You must remind yourself that actually, after the publication of Jean-François Lyotard's The Postmodern Condition, then you need not comply with a strict format just because it is called scientific. Because for Jean-François Lyotard, science has become a religion. And if it becomes metaphysical, then we have problems because, yeah. So from that point of view, I would suggest that if you want to tell your story in the form of izinganengwane, your findings, there is nothing that can restrict you from doing so, except a myopically oriented scientist. If they are not myopic and they are wide-minded and they see properly, they are not blind, I do not see any reason for their objection. I really do not. Thank you.
Manene na manenekazi, siyabonga. I'm going to actually hand over to Professor Mkhize to then take us home, I suppose. But again, a big round of applause to Prof. And I think another big round of applause to our Deputy VC.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sifunda, and I can say with great pride that she is one of the products of someone called Mkhize. Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Ramose. In isiZulu, they say, ngiswele imilomo eyinkulungwane ukubonga. I am short of 1,000 mouths to thank you. That is the literal translation. Because you have been excellent, beyond expectation in these 2 days. So thank you so much. Siyabonga kakhulu. We would also want to thank you as the audience. I'm sure many of you want to continue, but I've asked Dr. Sifunda that we must now bring this session to the close. I want to say we are exceptionally grateful, Baba Ramose, for sharing so graciously of your knowledge and time with us in the past 2 days. If I had a way, Professor Ramose would be living in our corridors and would be able to interact with him on a daily basis. But I am afraid one of my friends, Professor Lisiba Baloyi, has already beaten me to death. And Professor Ramose lives in his university. But if I had a choice, I'm going to negotiate with my friend, Professor Baloyi, that Professor Ramose spends 6 months of the year at UKZN, and then the other 6 months of the year at Sefaho Mahato Academic Hospital. Maybe we need to enter that negotiation. Would you support it if I put a motivation? So I don't know if I can conclude this session. I don't see Toli Swaye. Where is she? Because I think there are a number of people who need to be specifically recognized, and I don't want to recognize her in her absence. But were it not for Utoli Swa and Uspindile, please stand up. Were it not for these 2 ladies, Uspindile and Utloliswa, we would not have this seminar today or yesterday. For the past 6 weeks, they have been working very, very hard behind the scenes to make this a reality. So I want to say thank you very much for making this happen for us. I also want to thank all the technical team. They know that when I'm in trouble, even if I contact them in the last minute, I think we may have contacted them with 2 days to go. They never say no. So our technical team who have been photographing and recording the event, we want to say thank you very much. Even in the future, when we come and knock on your door, please let us in. So thank you very much. Before I put the mic down, I want to show you some work by Professor Ramose. I think he brought some of the books with him today. I think they are in that. I think they may be in there. Yes. Okay. We do have some books by Professor Ramose. In fact, there are many of them, but if you want to have a summary of some of the issues he was raising today, please at least get yourself a copy of African Philosophy Through Ubuntu. This book has been translated into Dutch, German, Portuguese, and many other languages because people out there internationally have realized the profundity of this work, not only for the liberation of peoples of African ancestry, but for the liberation of humanity in general, including the salvation of the globe as we understand it. So please do find a way. If you want a copy of the book, please come to my office or write to me. These copies we are going to keep in our unit, the Africology unit. If you want to come and browse, you are more than welcome to do so. USP will allow you into the unit, but she won't allow you to take the book away with you. You can only look at it while you are sitting there. Okay, so in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you as the audience. You have been very, very exceptional. Even in the future, if we ask you to come and listen and share with us, please do come and support us. I also want to thank my university in absentia, the executive of the university, my office, the college office, and all the people who have worked behind the scenes to make this a reality. So in conclusion, thank you very much again. And Baba Ramose, siyabonga kakhulu. I don't know if you would want also to say a few words of appreciation and thanks.
Good afternoon to you all once again. It is really my duty to thank you with words that I cannot express. As I told you in the beginning, the fact that you have decided to come here means much more than you can think it means to me. Whatever you think it means to me, please add to that and much more that I do not know, because I am profoundly grateful for your presence here. I know that you would not have been here if Professor Mkhize and the others working together with him have not made this opportunity possible. To you also, Ubaba Mkhize, and your team, I am seriously and profoundly grateful, because it shows me that you understand very well that the struggle for truth is at the same time the struggle for justice and peace. Justice and peace within ourselves, justice and peace among us across the globe, because we are the sons and daughters of one mother. We know how difficult it is to actually accept one another as brother and sister, aunt and uncle, for strange reasons. And the fact that you're here is an encouragement to me. It really encourages me. I have reason to believe that when my days are over, you will keep me smiling if I have any other destination to go to. So, from that point of view, I really want you to know, seriously so, that I do not take your presence here for granted. I thank everybody who has acted also as program director. I appreciate your role to make our conversation easy, pleasant, brotherly, sisterly. Mbonge kakhulu. Thank you.